Hey everybody, I'm back. I know my videos are getting further and further apart, but I swear I'm not meaning to disappear from YouTube forever. And I haven't meant to completely ignore Roots of Ritual. It's just, I feel like there's a lot going on, and I'm kind of going through this spiritual thing. It's a long story. So I'm just kind of focusing on my practice as much as I can and not really making the time for you guys as much. Sorry about that. I'm hoping to kind of rectify that. I've kind of found a new sense of purpose for kind of accomplishing some of my goals since my dad passed away a couple months ago. It's kind of... that's a long story. Anyway, I promised you guys a video this week, and this time I'm actually keeping said promise. And if you're friends with me on Facebook, you know that I had been thinking about making this video for at least about a month or so. I meant to post it before Beltane, but then I just kind of got busy and I wasn't sure if I wanted to post it and talk about this specific topic. And then I got an Ask Aislynn question about it, and I was like, okay, I guess it's time. So here's my disclaimer, my first disclaimer for this video. There will be 3. My first disclaimer is that this is going to be a mature topic. Dear Aislynn, that's me! My partner and I are beginning to become interested in sacred sexuality. We're looking to explore this area together, however we're wondering if we'll have to radically change our normal sexual practices in order to do this. We typically use birth control pills and a condom. Can we pursue a path that includes sacred sexuality with these measures? So because this question came to me specifically, and everybody out there knows that I follow a Wicca-inspired path, I'm going to answer from that perspective. But the second disclaimer for this video is that though I follow a Wicca-inspired path, everybody knows I'm not Wiccan, so I will not be discussing Wiccan practices. This is not about the Great Rite. I'm not a British traditionalist. I don't know anything about the Great Rite as it is practiced by them, therefore I cannot discuss it, and even if I did, I couldn't discuss it in a video because it's oath-bound. So that's disclaimer number 2. Disclaimer number 3 is that when I wrote my notes for this video, I realized that they're very focused on heterosexuality because the person I'm talking to, I know that they're heterosexual, and they're talking about their practices with their partner. However, feel free to substitute any other language when applicable if you are not heterosexual. I'm not meaning to ignore you. So basically, I want to present both sides of this issue so that you can make an informed decision about what you think is right for you, because as always, though this question was addressed to me, my answer may not fit your practice or your beliefs, so I'm going to basically present both sides of the argument. The people that would say that you cannot use either birth control pills or a condom or both would basically say that for a bunch of reasons. The first one that you're going to come across that's the most prevalent is that their interpretation of sex is somewhat narrow. It focuses on fertility only because because Wicca and Wicca-inspired paths are fertility religions. They focus on that union being able to produce a child. That is very important to them, and that is not to be discredited. Obviously, that is the goal of sex, procreation, at least in terms of evolution. The second argument that they will make, usually, is that when you are engaging in sexual practices of any sort, but specifically of a religious nature, it's all about the love and trust between the partners, especially if they are aspecting deities. There has to be perfect love and perfect trust. And they would argue that the use of a condom says that there's not perfect trust between partners in terms of transmitting diseases. They'd say that that is a marker of a couple that does not trust each other and is not fully comfortable with one another. Again, I'm not saying that I totally agree with any of these arguments. These are just the ones that I came across when I was looking at both sides of the argument online. The third argument was that condoms and birth control pills are not natural. They are made to hinder the natural process of behind sex, fertility, procreation, etc. So they are going to hinder the act itself. It's a different experience when you use those forms of birth control. They also may be a barrier to the energy exchange between partners. The fifth one was that in the use of some methods of birth control, specifically condoms or specific birth control methods, not necessarily the pill, it interrupts the flow of the ritual. For example, a lot of the rituals that I've read when I was researching this topic for writing my Beltane ritual for this year, there's a very specific flow in terms of the ritual script. The one that I ended up writing had a very long monologue, I guess, from the high priest before the sexual acts contained in the ritual would have begun. I wrote this particular ritual for Roots of Ritual as an example, so that were condoms to be used in this ritual, there would have to be a stopping point, and then the ritual would have to continue. Therefore, the energy would kind of be paused, and it would be broken up a little bit, so it wouldn't necessarily have the same effect in terms of the ritual participants. Those are basically all of the arguments I found against using these specific forms of birth control. On the flip side of this argument, which you must have figured out by now, I'm on that side, are the arguments that basically say that even with these barrier methods, it is still an act of love and pleasure. Therefore, it would fall under the protection of the charge of the goddess, which includes the line, "All acts of love and pleasure are my rituals." And if it is a ritual for the goddess, man can't really argue and say that it's not sacred, or it's not as sacred as other acts. Like I said, the definition of fertility that the people on the other side of this argument typically use is very narrow. It doesn't really include any other forms of sexual expression other than the union of a man and woman in order to create a child. When we often perform cakes and wine and ritual, a lot of people don't focus on procreation and that specific interpretation of fertility. A lot of people will focus on fertility of spirit, fertility of resources and the earth, fertility of the mind and inspiration and things like that. Those forms of creation. They won't necessarily be focused on, pregnancy and childbirth and things like that. Or they could be focused on the love that is represented in cakes and wine, or any form of sacred sexuality. They could be focused on the union of opposites in a heterosexual relationship. They could be focused on any other manner of things that are encompassed in the act of sex. It is not just about procreation, and a lot of sacred sexuality doesn't even focus on procreation. It focuses on the enlightenment and the spiritual awakening or opening that occurs at the point of orgasm, or it focuses on the merging of souls, or any other manner of things that happen during sex that don't involve conception. On Roots of Ritual and in my videos, you've probably noticed that I, like a lot of other spiritualists on a Wiccan-inspired path, focus on doing what makes you feel comfortable, as long as it respects the cultures and the religions that you work with. And this is definitely one of those cases. If you don't feel 100% comfortable with what you're doing, you've already lost a battle. There's no point in pursuing a path involving sacred sexuality or any sort of spiritual path if a key component makes you feel uncomfortable. You won't be able to fully engage in what you're doing, and you won't be able to grow from it if you're trying to overcome any sort of feelings of unease. And so if you're worried about getting pregnant when you are not ready for that emotionally, financially, medically, or whatever, Why would you put yourself in that situation? No one should make you feel like you have to do something or another in your personal, eclectic spiritual practice. As I said, this video is not focused on specific traditional rituals of any culture or religion. If there is a specific ritual that you are doing, then you should, be respectful of the cultures and the religions from which you're drawing. If they have specific rules about how it is done, you should do them. There's a fine line between doing what makes you feel comfortable and what will give you the greatest benefit spiritually and being disrespectful and just picking and choosing at random what suits you in terms of the eclectic buffet. If you're confused about that, I have a video on ethical eclecticism. I'll post a link in the sacred space below. So, like I said, it's a personal choice. You and your partner are going to have to discuss what makes you feel comfortable. If you typically use any sort of barrier method because either you're worried about pregnancy or you're worried about STDs that one of you may have or whatnot, or if you're worried about any other manner of things, or if it's just what you do and you're not ready to take things a step further, then by all means, adjust your practice accordingly. But simply using any form of birth control is not going to exclude the option of practicing sacred sexuality in some form. It's a very broad topic, so it encompasses a lot. So like I said, if you're going the eclectic approach, you can always do what makes you feel comfortable. If you're looking at specific rituals, like the Great Rite, if you want to be British traditionalist, and you're worried about that down the road, then that'll be something you'll have to talk about with others in your tradition. Because there will be specific rules that you may not be aware of until it gets closer to the time. But in personal practice, do what makes you feel comfortable. Do what gives you the greatest benefit from the practice that you're working with. So, yeah, I'm gonna try, and I know I say this at the end of every video, I'm gonna try not to be a stranger, and I'm gonna try to post more videos and things like that. I'm kind of excited that I just made a video. So yeah, I'll talk to you guys later, and bye!